Is rolling. You only have the DV tape, right?
Right.
Okay. 30 seconds going to black. Coming up, second.
Hi, my name is Paula Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. The purpose of the show is to go farther into topics, especially topics that are only superficially considered in the media, or maybe even considered in the wrong way. My nature is to champion the underdog. As soon as I hear about somebody that is not getting the fair end of things, knowing that we live in a society where we need all parts of the society working together in order for the society to be complete, I become highly interested in finding out ways to empower that part that seems to be getting the short end. When I was in India, I became interested in a religion, a Tibetan religion, when I found out that it was being very persecuted by the Dalai Lama. So when I came to New York, I was learning how to use the Express Studio. And the gentleman that's going to be on my show now, Dean Loren, he allowed me to sit in on one of his shows. And the show that Dean was doing at that time had to do with Holocaust victims getting the money that was determined that they were supposed to get. And he was looking into the fact that they weren't getting it. So I've asked Dean to be on the show with me today so we could talk about cruelty and see if we could do an analysis into this and understand what causes cruelty, why are human beings cruel to other human beings, and maybe do a little bit of grief work ourselves to see if in sort of unloosening places that hurt inside of us, we can be wiser and more savvy in knowing how to ensure that we don't get the short end of things in the future. So, Dean, thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you. And, I think it's very important that people understand grief. In fact, one of the first documentaries I made at MNN, which was down on 23rd Street at the time, was called Death is a Ceremony. Mm-hmm. Because we as Americans don't look at that grief process. We don't process it like other cultures, where there may be this sitting Shiva for 7 days, or there is a grief.
Sitting?
Yes, in the Jewish religion, the wife or the husband will, when somebody's
has
died, they will
right.
Take a time period for themselves.
Right.
And we we have a funeral, we have those types of scenarios, but we really don't have a process where we as American people or children can be walked through that it is okay to die. Mm-hmm. And then what complicates it is what you mentioned earlier, when you're an underdog and the circumstances.
Death has come prematurely.
Right.
Right.
And there's the element of cruelty in that.
Uh-huh. Oh, you mean you think the element of cruelty comes because of an immature society that doesn't grieve?
That plus the fact that we have a society that is cruel in itself. Mm-hmm. It is based on Roman law.
You're a lawyer, right,
Yes.
Dean?
And that whole Roman Britain foundation, and I don't think there's probably anybody that would, be hard pressed to say that Rome and Britain are probably two of the most cruelest cultures to
Right.
ever have come out of our humanity.
Right. When somebody called to my attention that when Jesus was crucified, that he was one of hundreds of thousands that were crucified by the Romans.
Absolutely.
This was not an unusual punishment.
And this was the common practice.
Right.
And then we see this in Britain with the pillories,
Mm-hmm.
where they would actually bring people into the town squares. They would do the hangings there, or they would actually put them in the stockade for a week or two.
Right.
You know, so put them on public, you know.
You know, it's very traumatizing to even hear about it. And I would think in those days in the Inquisition, they would apparently, when they were burning witches or whoever they felt was, you know, not correct member of society, everybody had to participate. Everyone in the village had to be there, and you had to buy a stick. They called them faggots. Did you know this is where faggot comes from? The faggots were the wood that you would buy, and if you didn't buy it, then you were nervous that you might be on a list and you might be next. So people, begrudgingly, obviously, would buy their faggots, and then they would contribute them, and then it was sort of it's a way of getting the community cohesive to go against whoever is shaking the status quo. I mean, when you start studying this history, it's so grisly and grueling, and yet then you think something like habeas corpus, how precious it was that for a moment we had this constitution where, you know, you couldn't speak against yourself. What's the actual term? You don't. You incriminate yourself.
Incriminate yourself.
Right.
The Fifth Amendment.
Right.
To be a witness against yourself.
Right. You can't be a witness against yourself. We're hearing.
Compelled to be a witness against yourself.
Right. You can't be compelled to be a witness against yourself. It wasn't until I started learning about the Inquisition that I realized why habeas corpus was so important. So that's why I wanted to invite you on my show, to see if we could explore together, you with your legal background, and also some of the personal cruelties against you.
Right. I know that I've been struggling in the court systems. Mainly I've been defending other people, not as an attorney, but I've been helping them as an advocate. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, the courts would come after me if I said I was practicing law.
Really?
Absolutely. And in fact,
what does that mean, come after you? What would they do?
They would, and they have in the past.
They take your license away, right?
Well, I have. I'm fighting right now for my license, but they would
they already took it away?
No, it was never taken away. It's in the process of being reviewed one more time. I quote unquote lacked character. Right. And in that I reported a divorce that was being rigged.
Oh, I see, right.
And so our court system considers whistleblowing not to be a character that they want within the lawyers.
Right, you're not malleable.
I'm not malleable. If I'm seeing something in court that is wrong, that it's being committed by the judges, then I am supposed to keep quiet.
Right. I just can't emphasize enough as I start to study it how precious people are like you, because you keep the flame going and alive that there is such a thing as justice, and that it's important that it's given out. Do you think this would be a good time to do the roll-in? Or you want to prepare the audience for it?
The roll-in, actually we're going to hear a CD. It's about 28 seconds. And this is the end of my argument. What I'm arguing on behalf of the children of color in the school system at Martin Luther King High School. And they had no books, they had no licensed teachers, they were incarcerated like animals.
The children?
The children in high school. And then they were being funneled into the prison industrial system. So what happened was we were making our argument, and this involves a multi-million-dollar Medicaid fraud, because all those services were being billed to Medicaid. So we had done this lawsuit to protect the parents and the students. The students were being arrested. The parents were being literally locked out of the schools if they got involved with their children and championed their rights. And the judges didn't want me to represent the students and the parents in this class
even
action.
as an advocate.
Even as an advocate, they were threatened that I would have a license. They were. Is there something? What?
She wants to know what do you want over the Roland?
Oh, just what's on the character generator.
Right.
There's 4
Yeah.
things on the character sheet.
It says Dean, Loren, and whatever. Just use your good sense.
The
Use
one
your good
that-
judgment.
Yes.
Being defamed?
Yes.
Yeah, whatever you think. Just, and be creative. You can do other things too. And don't worry, I'll get this on editing. But
That's all right.
so
Right. So the whole intent before the system was to prevent this case from being litigated. So I had to be taken out. And already I was on the list.
just a second. I want to back up.
Okay.
They were going to take your license away. You said they didn't want to give you a license. You
there's-
said the word license. What does that mean?
Right.
License to do what?
In order to pass before that bar that separates the audience and from where the lawyers stand, that's called the bar. In
Oh.
order to pass that bar, you have to pass an exam, and
That's
then
what that means. I never understood
Yes.
that, passing the bar. Okay,
Right.
you have to pass an exam.
and you must be deemed to have the character of an attorney.
Right.
Okay, and that is where they can come in and prevent activists from becoming attorneys.
I see. So that's the scenario here.
Yes.
So you were there, and then we're going to listen now to the response.
Yes.
Okay, so let's let that CD roll, and this will be, you can, just let it roll.
Right.
Being son and daughter will forgive my trespasses so that I can move forward and get my law license without being blacklisted. Thank you. And thank you for your time.
We'll reserve decision. Mr. Cox is not here yet. He's here. If we could have Judge Katzman come out. This room, sir.
And that's the end of the tape. What you you have to listen to it, but what happens is I'm leaving the podium, and she's calling for Judge Katzman, who is in the back room. And at that time, Judge Cardamone will lean down into her and make like a joke. And he says, do you understand what he's talking about? And to the audience, it appears that they're making a joke. And this is not to be caught on audio tape. And Judge Sotomayor will reply, he's a miserable faggot. I do, he's a miserable fag.
And you heard that?
Yes,
in the
that is
court?
on the tape. No, at the time, we could not hear it because they were whispering.
Right.
But it was recorded on an audio tape.
And you got a hold of that tape, and that's what we
Yes.
just heard.
Right. And what makes it cruel is that Judge Katzman is in the back antechamber. And he goes, it's not that degrading. And then Judge Cardamone, there's another attorney coming up and go, well, this one's straight. So they're actually talking about the attorneys, whether they perceive to be gay or they're straight, and they're making these remarks about them. So it's twofold. First of all, we have a judge in the back room speaking with the judges on the court. So this means that the judges are wired, and they're getting instructions from the back room. And this is what we call, this was supposed to be prevented, back in the 1800s with the Star Chamber, where you had judges being told what to say.
Wow, I mean, you've stumbled into something huge, but first I want to say, when you found that they said this about you, How did that make you feel?
Well, it had confirmed everything that I knew. There are many people...
You mean prejudice against people being homosexual?
Prejudice about homosexuality, as well as the cruelty in the court, that no matter who comes in front of them, and no matter how well they're prepared, how good the papers are written, how good the arguments are, bona fide, the judges dismiss them.
Now, like when DeAndre was here in my show before, I was trying to sort of, in a way, try to understand why her husband did what he did maybe today. Maybe he's scared. You know, people have done bad things and they try to cover it up more and more and more, and it gets more and more complicated. Do you think that they made these cruel remarks towards you to fortify themselves, to do dastardly deeds? You know what I'm saying? To kind of toughen themselves up? I mean, I'm trying to get into the head of a pedophilia I'm very interested in. I'm going, how can someone do this to children? I keep trying. And if I'm asking how, and the answer starts coming, I have to start letting it in to try to figure out, to kind of know the enemy. And the enemy might not even be that person, but they might be in the grips of an addiction, or, I mean, there's an addiction for power. There's an addiction for social acceptance.
And that is what we're seeing here. Because
Right.
that was the comment, because Judge Cardamone is approximately 72 years old. He's one of the most powerful men on the court. He is speaking with Judge Sotomayor, and she is a Puerto Rican woman, perhaps in her 50s. And so we have discussed this between myself and the other Latinos, that she is playing along. She's a follower. That's why she was chosen to be on the court. So her response that I do, he's a miserable fag, she is saying that to the older judge, the very cruel judge. So she wants to be part of that gang.
In other words, count me in on your meanness or your...
Right.
I want to be in the club.
Yes.
Ooh.
I'm going to join in with that cruelty so that you will accept me.
Okay, I got you. So now, Dean, here we are in public access. We have this great opportunity to let this message out to the viewers. Can we be the greater souls to now say, how do we heal? We know that people are beholden to other people, just like people are addicted to drugs. We know that you've been offered these drugs. In this case, it's the drug of power and prestige. Do you have any thoughts on, or have you thought of this in your moments of agony and heartbreak, and, you know, why is the world like it is?
Every day.
Every day.
Minute. And what I'm very concerned about is we see this rise. I mean, you have been speaking about the neocons moving with the threat of nuclear war with Iran. And I am looking for the people to come as a whole.
Right.
I think I read in some of your literature that Omega point, the point of Omega, where the people can come together as a cohesive force. And right now, the people are being divided. They don't have faith that their fellow neighbor will assist them.
Right.
It's become...
And they see that the powerful ones, to get their protection, you have to be cruel like the powerful ones.
Yes. It's almost the game of Survivor. And I don't think it would be such a popular TV show if it wasn't so close to reality.
Right. Right, right, right.
And to make a point, and then you can give me your spiritual feedback on this, we have people that... I asked myself, why did not the community of color speak out against the atrocities that were committed against their children in the high schools of New York City?
Right.
It astounded me. I thought maybe, well, they never had books themselves. They never had a quality
But they're
education.
judges.
Pardon?
But they're judges. Didn't
Well,
you say the 50-year-old lady that
You're
called you the
absolutely
fag?
right.
The miserable fag?
But I don't know if she was a product of the public education system here in New York City.
Uh-huh.
And if she was also in an older, I'm talking about the 80s and 90s.
I see.
And then I realized that the adults, the parents, even if they wanted to speak up, many of them were city workers.
And they were worried about losing their jobs.
Absolutely.
Right.
It was a question of keeping food on the table.
Right. But see, I think of this too. My viewers know I've made it abundantly clear that I'm part German, and I grew up in Berkeley, and a lot of my classmates were Jewish, and it was just a horrible shame to hear about what the Germans were doing to the Jews and to the gypsies and to the homosexuals, but particularly to the Jews, because most of my classmates were Jewish. And then when I start discovering that Prescott Bush was hired by Averell Harriman and that the Nazi Party was essentially funded from New York, I just felt just so ripped off, because I go, and then how the Germans themselves had the mark devalued 1 trillion to 1. If you had saved up 1 trillion marks, it would be worth 1 mark. And that you get people to be concentration camp guards because they hadn't had a job. They were starving. They were hungry. That so if you go into a population that in this day and age the media is not telling us about, and if the poverty is so grinding, that's where you recruit the people who then are trained to become cruel, to run the Guantanamo Bays and the Abu Ghrabs. And so that's why it behooves us to pay careful attention to our neighbor, and that our neighbor is in abundance. Otherwise, it backfires on us. It will come to haunt every echelon of society.
You know, you bring up a very good point. You have to watch your neighbor and make sure that they have abundance. When I first came to New York back in '85, the first thing I did, I moved into an apartment on 74th and 5th. I immediately introduced myself to every neighbor in our small townhouse, because I said that I wanted you to know who we were. It would be eventually a neighbor who didn't want to become involved in my life, that caused a fall from grace. You know, she didn't want to call the police.
Oh.
Why?
Because she knew you.
It wasn't the fact that she knew me.
She
didn't
didn't.
want to get involved.
Oh, I don't know the story. What are you saying now? You met all your neighbors.
Right.
You
And
liked
then
them.
later,
They knew you. You knew them.
Right. And then years down the road, when I was being assaulted in my apartment,
Mm-hmm.
I had asked my neighbor to call the police.
Right.
Because I was fighting and I couldn't get to the phone. And she refused.
Really?
And it escalated to the point where a lot of bad things happened. And had she as a neighbor said, my duty is to help Dean, and just to pick up a phone and call.
Right. So in other words, you had an insight into how mind-controlled people are, that we don't live in a free society. That you know, are you telling me she felt she would be in jeopardy if she protected you?
Well,
or even took the steps to see that you got protection?
Right, because she was involved in the government, and she did not want to become...
You mean you were being like toughed up for some of the things you've been trying to do? Is that why you were being assaulted?
It was an incident that had to do with a family relationship and real estate. But her particular problem was that she was a government operative. And her first move was to protect her...
Her job.
Not her job, but her cover.
Oh.
So she wasn't going to call the police. And it was just like, when somebody is being beaten up or threatened with a knife,
right.
You know, you have...
But then again, I say, we as the healers, we have to keep looking beyond that. Like, I know in the 9/11 Truth Movement, there's plenty of CIA involved. But I figure, you know, as Josh Walensky, great Josh Walensky said, they're just people who need to pay the rent, you know?
Absolutely.
So why not, you know, people working in the CIA, all of those of you in the CIA, you're human beings, we're human beings, and all of us are Americans, and we have this incredible Constitution, which is not like what George Bush had said, a bleep, bleep piece of paper. It was a beacon of hope that, if you study our history, came as a result of experience of the very darkest and worst kinds, you know, the Inquisition and you know, there's other abuses in history. And for a moment, we had that opportunity, and I think if we wake up, we can make it even more glorious. We can like own the Constitution. We won't just parrot it like we did in school, you know, how we say the Pledge of Allegiance, but we don't really understand what we're pledging allegiance to. And I was talking to DeAndre about it, and I said, you know, for me, the way I interpret it, it's because you have children and grandchildren that it's important, if not to talk, then to find your way to those who will talk, who can do it. Because, Dean, I think you and I and DeAndrea are really blessed. I think when you do find that vision of what is worth dying for, that gives you energy that is so divine, and it goes beyond any type of being in love or sexual thrill, or it's nothing in my life has surpassed the moments that I'm living right now, being connected with the people I'm connected with, who I feel profoundly are making a difference, and you're one of those people.
Right. Well, thank you. And, you know, it's interesting
I
trying...
feel protected from that divine connection. That is the spiritual practice, you know. And if it gets a little too crazy or whatever, then I just back off. I watch the sunrise over the East River. I walk in the park. You know what I mean? And just sort of pull away from everything and just balance myself.
I think that is a very good rule that you have to do. You have to understand when to pull back.
Yeah, right.
And so many people, I mean, like I myself need to pull back a little bit at these times because I'm back again battling these judges. And so I have to I find myself getting through each day because I say to myself, I could be in Darfur right now with no arms.
Right.
I could be eaten. There are people...
But you're here with us now. I hear we only have 30 seconds, so we have to wrap it up. But anyway, thank you for joining me on this show, Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. And I look forward to having Dean Loren as a guest many more times on the show, and that we can all work together and create new realities. I'm Paula Gloria. This is Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. If you have any comments, contact me at rabbitholecentral@earthlink.net. I'll pass them on to Dean or DeAndre or whoever my guest happens to be. So thank you for joining me. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll do this again. And we'll bring other roll-ins, things that you feel are kind of relevant to this.
Okay, so we're at...
Okay, so let's get the third chair in here for Joe and DeAndrea.
Okay, one more. That's your chair, and we've got your mic here already.
Okay, so we need to bring that chair over, Joe. And by the way, Joe, that issue that you brought up last time, the right to address the government.
The right to petition the government for redress of grievances.
Right, that is so important. I am learning that now. That is the cornerstone.
And I wouldn't confine petitioning. There's many ways to petition. They try to confine petitioning to like a written document.
That you, as a family member representing the unity between son and daughter, would forgive my trespasses so that I can move forward and get my law license without being blacklisted. Thank you. And thank you for your time.
We'll reserve decision. Mr. Cox is not here yet. He's here. If we could have Judge Katzman come out. This one's
that you, as a family member representing the unity between son and daughter, would forgive my trespasses so that I can move forward and get my law license without being blacklisted. Thank you. And thank you for your time.
We'll reserve decision. Mr. Cox is not here yet. He's here. If we could have Judge Katzman come out. This room, sir.
Hope that you, as a family member representing the
30
unity
seconds
between
going
son
to
and
black.
daughter, would forgive my trespasses so that I can move forward and get my law license without being blacklisted. Thank you. And thank you for your time.
We'll reserve decision. Out. This room, sir.
Unity between son and daughter would forgive my trespasses so that I can move forward and get my law license without being blacklisted. Thank you. And thank you for your time.
We'll reserve decision. Mr. Cox is not here yet. He's here. If we could have Judge Katzman come out. This room, sir.
And that's the end of the tape.
Now that times are so hard, we're being called upon to really to use it or lose it.
Right, and people don't even know what it is.
But now we're finding out because we're seeing what it isn't, you know?
Right. Well, what is the old saying? You don't know what you have until you lost it.
Right, right.
And I'm afraid that we have lost it. And where do we get the spirituality to say, are you willing to sacrifice your life?
Where do we get the spirituality to say that?
Yes, if you can find that within your soul, that you are willing to die for an ideal.
Right, right, right.
That's the ultimate, I see.
You know, some people on YouTube have told me, like I got a very touching response from a Vietnam vet that said that he absolutely knew that there was CIA and whatever, and he said, I can't even begin to tell you what I've experienced because I have children and grandchildren